So, do you remember when you and I got like just crazy excited for the Assassin's Creed movie?
Oh, how could I forget? I mean, you had an awesome looking trailer. You had the cast announcement, which looked actually solid, by the way, when you had Michael Fassbender and Jeremy Irons. It's like,
Hmm.
hey, they've got some names attached to this.
Yeah. Well,
This
and
could go well.
we had Marion Cotillard, who I like to call
Hmm
like Marion Collard Greens because I just can't pronounce her name. Um,
And I'd
yeah,
like to point out that those trailers did win at the Golden Trailer Awards for Best Trailer, it
ooh,
looks like.
yeah, that's right. Because they had some
Mhm.
Kanye mixed in there with
Yep.
the leap of faith.
hmm
I mean, the hype machine
Oh, it was
was,
real.
yeah. I mean,
hmm
they definitely had it right. And this, so I'm not even going to link to this because no one needs to read my old blog that I used to keep up.
Mm-mm.
But I actually wrote this article on like 10 reasons why the Assassin's Creed movie should be okay.
Why it should be okay.
it,
Ooh.
it, it, yeah, that aged like a fine American cheese, let me tell you. or, or like a craft single.
Oh, it's been left out in the sun
It
for
just did not.
roughly 3 minutes.
Well, here's the thing, okay? Like the building blocks for this movie being legit were there. Like you've got Ubisoft that retained creative control over many aspects of the movie itself. Like that was the only reason why they said we agree to do this because we're going to keep, you know, we're going to keep hold of the reins pretty tight here. And then when I saw the finished product, I said those reins must have been attached to a different horse because 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 you guys were not writing this one.
No, no, they weren't. Um, and that's what really is damning about the whole thing is that there's so many like key elements that could have been done so well, and like they even started to do them very well in the movie, and they just flat out fucking fell apart so quickly. Um,
Mm-hmm.
One thing that it does, like another movie that fell apart incredibly quickly, to the point where I think the lead actor's only thing he liked about the movie was the fact that he met his wife on the set, and that is Green Lantern. Um, one thing that Green Lantern does terribly, other than its CGI and plot, um, is the fact that they spend so much time on both Oa and Earth that you don't really get a good foot in either story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens with the Animus past and outside of the Animus present is they try spending half the movie in, half the movie out, and it doesn't work because you can't really attach to either story very well. Where they should have really gone with basically the formula for the first game, where you're outside of the Animus for maybe 10, 15% of that game, and then
Mm-hmm.
most of it you're inside exploring and doing shit. Where that's really all you needed. Um, you needed like an opening part of the movie, basically revealing the plot of what's trying to happen. A mid part where he comes out um, to basically say like, "Oh, we're this much closer. You're going back in because we're going to find it now." And then a very end of the movie where they could even leave it for a cliffhanger, like, "Hey, we found it. And it's going to be ours soon." And then boom, movie's done. Sets up for a sequel. And they just spend so much more time in between those scenes um, with um, with our assassin. And I think what's the time period here? It's
Oh, it's Spanish
is it Spanish Inquisition time?
Inquisition. Yeah, no one expected it.
No one expected it, and then it just happened with Aguilar.
Yeah,
Um,
Aguilar de Nerja. Yeah,
which is that
which,
another eagle reference? Is that another bird thing?
oh, you know what? I have to think about that because I don't know if Aguilar is a bird of prey translation. Um, yeah, I'll have to look into that one because since it wasn't part of the main series, the movie obviously didn't have nearly as much
Mm-hmm.
stuff behind it. But if I had to bet on this, I
Oh,
would it has to be
just looked
related
it
to
up. It's
Eagles.
eagle. It is
Eagle.
eagle.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah. I was gonna say it had to be Eagles because the Agula was also the name of it's a very similar name to Connor's ship, wasn't it?
Yep.
So the Agula was yeah, duh. We knew the answer.
Yeah,
It
we
was
knew it the
there.
whole time. It was rattling around. We just had
Boom.
to stop the can.
Sometimes when you fly by the seat of your pants, it just works.
Yeah, and then you fall in the mud in those pants.
The
The
vent.
very pants you were trying to return. Which is I think what this movie did. Because again, like it looked so good. It had so much promise, and you're thinking, okay, here's the movie that's finally going to break like the 5% approval rating for video game movies. This is going to be the one that does it, and
uh,
and it just doesn't. It falls flat on its face.
God, did we hope? And the thing was, we talked about a couple factors as to why it should have been decent because
Mm-hmm.
Ubisoft had a lot of creative control here. We quote unquote we thought they did.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Michael Fassbender. He was actually a producer on this film, and
Mm-hmm.
his film studio actually is what helped get this made. So I was really surprised by that because Fassbender is one of those guys who is I don't want to say spiritually attached to his roles, but you can just tell there's an air about him that's
Mm-hmm.
it's far more serious than most other actors. And that's what really shocked me when I saw this film was that it seemed like somebody just kind of half-assed put this plot together,
Yeah.
and then they just filmed it with a Zack Snyder Instagram filter.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that really, really killed me with this movie is the apple of Eden, and they introduce it in the early part of the movie to say, and it gives the apple a lot of weight. And if you've played the video games, you know how powerful the objects are. You can basically cause excruciating pain to anyone around you with it, or you can flat up control what they do using the apple.
Yeah.
And they'll have the person will do they just bend to your will. And so the video game people know the weight of the apple of Eden. And they kind of don't tell you what the apple can do in the movie. They just
Mm-mm.
make it seem like it is an object of terrifying power. And so you're led to believe that the whole time. And then um, two things happen with the apple. One thing happens with Aguilar, um, where he basically has the apple. He's cornered. It starts glowing, and everyone just kind of stops what they're doing and walks away.
Mm-hmm.
And like, okay, well, this could just be that they know what it does. They're afraid of it. And Aguilar isn't fully aware of what it can do. He just knows he has to keep it out of like the hands of the Templars. So they saw that it was activating. They're like, fuck that. Time to skedaddle. Um, and then, of course, when um, they realize where the apple is after like going through Aguilar's memories, uh, they find it in the present time, in the present storyline. And this is where it's even worse because you have this whole like gathering of people, and the main villain has the apple in his hand, and he's wielding it like it's you know I don't know, a nuclear weapon. Like it seems like it has a lot of weight to it, and all it ever fucking does is glow green.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't do anything. Like they never show it do a damn thing in that movie. If they could have at least done like one thing where they like took um like one of the people that they were like holding on to like go through their memories, and they just killed one person, just even a small like little preview, like, oh, okay, so this thing can just basically kill people by being around them. Okay, this is at least something. Like it can do more than that, but it's something. But they never do that with it. All they do is like, oh, hey, it glows green.
Well, they do something very important with it that you haven't quite mentioned yet.
Mm-hmm.
And what they actually did with the Apple that they don't talk about unless you've got like the director's cut commentary is that the Apple makes every character in the movie boring.
Yep, that's its secret. It's
they,
on the whole time.
they never mention it. Yeah, just like Steve-O in a Jackass movie, right? It's
Mhm.
just it's full intensity but boredom. I I that
Ouch.
that that was my biggest issue with the Assassin's Creed movie because you
Mhm.
and I spent almost 90 minutes dissecting why the video game series
Mhm.
had been made so well and the
Yeah.
characters were so strong.
Mhm.
And the main character that Michael Fassbender plays in the modern day is named Callum Lynch, who
Mhm.
is, he's literally uh, going to prison for killing a pimp.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. I guess
Mhm.
that's as good as anything.
I
Honestly, I thought,
guess. Mhm.
but there's just not a whole lot that attaches you to this movie. I mean,
Mhm.
there's no character that's really all that relatable, but like there's nothing that's really that happens in this movie where you think I could see myself being in this person's shoes.
Yeah.
I mean, they just took, like NPCs,
Mm-hmm.
non-playable characters, and they made an entire film about the ones that don't do anything at
Mm-hmm.
all. Like there's a movie with Ryan Reynolds coming out about NPCs that looks really funny.
Oh.
But this is an NPC who realizes he's living in a game,
Oh,
and
that's
so
fantastic.
he
Mm-hmm.
wants to do more with his chosen story. But that's
Mm-hmm.
not what happens here.
No, no,
Like,
no. This isn't like Viva la Dirt League and their epic NPC man, which you have not watched those. I will happily plug that web series. Their epic NPC man stuff is just phenomenally hilarious.
yeah, not a sponsor, but we'll definitely see if they'll bring us on for a conversation.
I mean, if they even say like, hey, if you fly out to New Zealand, we'll feature you. You have to pay for it because we're not about that. I'm flying to New Zealand to be in the video. I don't even care.
Giddy
I'm
up.
like, nope, I'm in. Bring
Giddy
me
up.
aboard.
I totally go, just because the fact I've always wanted to see Hobbiton, and then hopefully accidentally run into the Flight of the Concords, but we can talk about that later.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the biggest miscues Assassin's Creed the movie made was that they made the creed sound like this mysticism based
Mm-hmm.
thing. Like they because they didn't even really explain it that well. Like they
Mm.
talk they call it the creed. They talk about the creed like several
Yeah.
times. And I'm like, first off, guys, that's not what the creed is.
Mm-mm.
The creed isn't some, every time they talk about the creed, I feel like there's incense burning and you can see the smoke around. It's like, no, guys, the
No.
creed is really fucking simple. It's it's
Mm-hmm.
it's three things and that's it. And
Yep.
it's been that way since the beginning. Like,
Yeah. It's just about maintaining the health of the brotherhood. Like there's nothing mystic about it.
yeah, it's like it's less complicated than pruning your garden. Okay, it's not that hard to figure out. And so
Mm-hmm.
so when they fucked that up, I was just like, oh man, I this is just gonna be a total suck fest. And it literally looked like a movie that was sponsored by the Sharper Image. Like I
Mm-hmm.
mean, now that's one thing they actually did manage to get right, was that Abstergo does feel like if the Sharper Image took a shit for like, a square mile, that's what Abstergo would look like. And it did. That's what that
Mm-hmm.
compound that Callum Lynch is, staying in. It looks like what you see in the video games where Abstergo has these massive, concrete,
Mm-hmm.
emotionless facilities that they work in.
Yeah, it's very much like an Apple store.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, yeah. Except the geniuses don't move their eyebrows when they talk to you. And
No, no, that's in the job description. They're not allowed to do that.
dude, the only thing that I thought the movie did even remotely well was when they took the animus from like a fairly missionary idea,
Mm-hmm.
where you're just kind of laying down, whether it's on a flatbed or
Yeah.
you're comfy in it, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they made it into this fully immersive apparatus that, mimics the movements of the memories. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, like
Yeah.
that's kind of cool to
That's a
see.
fun, that's a fun little creative take on it. We'll give you
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It was fine. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
visually it looked beautiful.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, outside of that, the whole rest of the movie was just it was clunky. And
Yeah. I mean, we're not like Mortal Kombat Annihilation bad,
oh
but we're
no,
getting there. You're close. Like you are just treading that water.
yeah, that was the other thing I had to wonder about, because when Assassin's Creed, or when I should say the producers of the movie, when they picked Justin Kurzel to direct it, I was wondering, who the fuck is Justin Kurzel?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the only thing he had really been known for up to that point was like I think either a stage version of Macbeth or a film version of Macbeth that he did. And like, I mean, that was pretty much the only major thing he had done up to that point in time. And I was like, Justin Kurzel, like,
Bold
okay,
move. Okay. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it became abundantly clear that
Mm-hmm.
something crushed under the weight of expectations here. And part of that was the script. Part of that was the inability to really create anything meaningful between, like you mentioned, either of the
Mhm.
worlds that we're introduced to. And then the one thing that they did have a pretty good grasp on, though, was just the action sequences with the
Yeah,
assassins.
those did look beautiful. We'll give them that.
Yeah, well, because you had real stuntmen and women that
Mhm.
were jumping up and down real buildings. You know,
Mhm.
they were actually scaling real walls and doing flips 3 or 4 stories up. The leap of faith that you see in the movie was one of the highest recorded stunts that was a free
Mhm.
fall ever. It was one of the highest ones.
Wow.
So that was legit. Like that was a
Mhm.
legit leap of faith that a guy did. And so
And
yeah.
like costumes looked beautiful too. Like I give him that. Like the actual look of the assassins, the Templars, and even the modern day stuff was so well done. And
Mhm.
it's also, I have to point out, so easy to fuck up the hood
Oh,
for these characters, where it looks like it's just overly puffy and it looks like a bad hoodie. And like that's something they got completely right in this movie. Is the hoods looked like they kind of they were the right amount of fabric. We had like a little bit of overhang in the front, which is
mhm.
kind of like a classic nod to, like, again, like the eagle beak that was on Altair and
Mhm.
Ezio's um, hoods.
Yep.
So like that's there and that looks good, and like everything looks like it fits when it comes to um, prop work, costume work, and setting, at least for the anime within the animus.
Yeah, the period stuff looked
Hmm.
really really solid. I mean, it was really good. Now, the only thing that I thought was really risky was the idea to have them speak like the natural language of
Hmm.
the area. I mean, it's like like we talked about in an earlier episode. I'm a history buff. I don't
Hmm.
care about reading the subtitles. That's fine.
Yeah.
Um, but once again, we're talking about the weight of the film,
Hmm.
and if people are coming into this and they're trying to get context out of things, I'm sorry, but if you're writing subtitles for people to get immersed into an experience here, I would just say screw it. Just
Hmm.
let's just do the standard historical thing where everyone's got a British accent, no matter what country they come from. And
Especially the villains. The villains will always be British.
yes, and of course, if there's a scientist, they're German, and so
Oh, of course.
yeah,
Hmm.
like I mean, I think that could have just been a really easy thing they could have
Hmm.
done to kind of pull people into this. Like let's keep the past stuff. I wouldn't say formulaic, but let's make it easier to digest.
Hmm.
And so they totally just went full tilt on that. And
Yeah.
so what ends up happening, though, is like you mentioned, you don't really attach to either one of these very
Hmm.
much, and man, I felt really bad for some of the actors in this movie because, like we talked about, Marion Cotillard is, she's been solid in almost every movie I've seen her
Hmm.
in. For the exception of her dying in The Dark Knight Rises, that was probably one of the worst death scenes
Yeah.
I've ever
Yeah.
seen. but like Jeremy Irons totally underused in this movie.
Hmm.
Brendan Gleeson, dude, I fucking love the Gleeson family. Between Brendan and his son Domhnall, who is in like the Harry Potter series, and he was in Star Wars as well. The sequel trilogy is oh god, I'm gonna forget his name. Is it Knox or Mox? What the hell is his name? Get the
I'm
hell.
not sure. I'm lost on it.
It's fine. It'll come back to me
Hmm.
at like 3 a.m. when I have no reason to think about it. Um, but yeah, I mean, like they had some pretty serious acting talent in this movie, and I don't know what happened in the creative process with it. Like, oh, General Hux, by the way, I knew it was going to come to
Oh,
me.
he was Hux.
Yeah,
Ah.
he was Hux. That's who Dom Hall
Hmm.
Gleason is, Brendan Gleason's son. But
Hmm.
oh, and you know what? For those of us who have been paying attention to Joe and I's meme page, which you probably never have heard of, called Conflict Free Memes,
Hmm.
we actually posted a video of a guy who has to go to the bathroom while he's on a road trip with his friends,
Oh yeah.
and they say just pee, just go in the bottle, and you
Hmm.
and you think he's gonna pee in the bottle, but he actually shits in the bottle. That's Dom Hall Gleason.
Hmm. Oh,
So,
fantastic. And
but yeah, yeah.
that performance was much more believable than anything we get out of this movie.
Oh God, so much more. It's just it doesn't make sense to me. It
Hmm.
really doesn't because we talked about the the Assassin's Creed Lineage short
Hmm.
film that they made,
Yeah.
and that was made with a soundstage, and it was part of the Ubisoft like in-house studio that made that, and the costumes were legit. They literally used the same voice actors as the physical actors,
Hmm.
and somebody clearly gave them good enough direction to say, "Hey, I want you to play a character that's alive."
Can you do that?
Yeah. Have you done anything like that before? Because everybody in this movie felt like they had a lobotomy. I mean, it just
Hmm.
it made absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah.
And clearly,
Uh,
we're not the only people that thought that either.
oh
I
no,
mean,
this thing got tore apart.
yeah,
It did not do well at all.
yeah, we're not going to adjust for
Mm-mm.
inflation on the box office for this because, frankly,
It'd just be depressing.
well, for one, the money hasn't changed that much,
Not
but
that much, no.
it was a box office of $240.7 million against a budget of 125. So even if we just went with like your standard uh like Hollywood money math on
Hmm.
this, budget times two is usually what it needs to make, because with marketing costs it's about that much, right?
Hmm.
So even with the math, this movie was probably a write-off for somebody,
Yeah. We
because
don't
if you
know.
remember,
I don't
yeah.
know what that means, but the people who are writing it off do,
Yeah, the
and
people
they're the
that
ones
do,
writing it off.
they know, and they write it off. Yeah. Yeah, it just it just felt so so painful for me,
Hmm.
because obviously you and I both were like, telling people about it. We were excited about it.
Yeah, the hopes were
Um,
high.
yeah, I took the wife with. We went to go see it, and
Hmm.
we're walking out of the movie, and she's like, "They're there, they're there."
It'll be okay. It'll be okay.
Yeah, we'll get you some ice cream on the way home. It'll be fine. Yeah, but yeah, you're totally right. Like I think the Rotten Tomatoes was like 18% for this one.
Hmm.
Now, just to be fair though, once again, we are going to give some compliments to this movie. Visually, it did look pretty good.
Hmm.
Um, and we talked about some of these live action like stunt people that did a really great job.
Yeah.
So it wasn't overly CGI.
No, no, it did. There are lots of practical effects that were used in this movie, and that was a always a great choice.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. The practical effects. I mean, it made it feel like you were in it a bit more, right? But yeah, as far as the story and the plot goes, man, that's
Hmm.
usually what Ubisoft does not have a problem with getting right. And so, what the hell happened here? You know?
Yeah, I'd like to say that it's catching up at nights, but I have for the most part moved on from what they've done to this franchise by making this movie. Um,
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Hmm.
it's kind of the same effect we've mentioned a few times with Game of Thrones.
Hmm.
No, like Game of Thrones ended so poorly, no one's talking about it anymore.
Yep.
And Assassin's Creed, the movie, was so bad.
Hmm.
I mean, it's I can't even remember the last time I saw like an image still for it, or
Hmm.
um anything for it. And I subscribe to a bunch of like Assassin's Creed like fan channels and stuff, and
Yeah.
I'm always looking into this kind of shit, and there's nothing there on it. Like no one cares. I mean, the can't like there's going to be a sequel for it that Michael Fassbender was totally on board to make,
Hmm.
which at least his enthusiasm was pretty solid for it.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, the financier for it, like New Regency, they wanted to do a franchise,
Hmm.
and yeah, they canceled the additional films that were going to go along after this. So
Yeah, and it's just sad because like like we talk about that this franchise is kind of laid out for the filmmakers. Like it's got a lot of well-established lore and a lot of places where you can go to.
yeah,
Where they even it was even I don't know, it was nice that they actually added a new assassin to the group, and it wasn't taking an existing favorite and just fleshing out a movie that could make you, I don't know, take a little bit away of what you enjoyed about the series. Um, and then again, like you said, like you gave you a great cast. It's like giving someone like the best possible like sculpting clay or best possible material to sculpt, and the person who's in charge of sculpting just has no flipping clue what to do with it. And that person is just the writers and director, to be honest. Because again, like your actors and your story, that's your clay, and that's a wonderful piece that you already have right there. And then like they just didn't know how to work with it.
I'd like to use the analogy of using a Desert Eagle .50 to open up a can of soda. like, will it work?
Mhm.
Yes, it
Yeah,
will.
it'll get the job done.
Yeah, technically, you will have opened that can of soda,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not exactly what you need to do here.
No,
Okay.
it's like the old saying goes: you brought a bazooka to a knife fight,
Well,
and
that's what they tilted way too hard into,
mm-hmm,
was making this be like an artsy looking film.
mm-hmm,
You know, they tried to make it look way too dark. And it's like, this is the first movie for this property that people are seeing widespread. Like,
yeah,
that's not the thing that
mm-mm,
you need to do. What you need to do is make a film that is fairly easy to consume. You know, think like a National Treasure, for example,
mm-hmm.
right? Like you pull people in with, with characters that are somewhat relatable, fun to kind of get behind. And I'm sorry, but some guy who's on death row for killing a pimp,
Don't really care about. Like, no, that guy can die. That's fine.
it's like
Um,
he killed somebody. I don't give a shit. Like, come
yeah,
on.
no, and I don't know if it was like the idea of like Desmond was relatable, because he was just his analogy he was just a dude. Like, yeah, his childhood seemed a little weird growing up in the organization that his family kept moving from spot to spot, and it looked like he was a part of a cult. He hated it. He got out of there, and then he was a bartender, I think in New York City or LA or like a larger city, and then he gets hunted down and kidnapped, and he's plucked from obscurity. And that was kind of what was relatable about Desmond Miles, is like, yeah, he just seemed like he was a normal dude who got pulled out of it. And while there is that sense that like he could disappear because if he was taken, no one would notice or care except for his bartending job, and that turnover rate's high enough where they're not worried about it. They'll be a new bartender, no big deal. So I guess I don't know if that was like the tone they're going for. Like, hey, this guy's on death row. No one's going to care if he goes missing or seems to die earlier than he should. But it's like, yeah, but
Yeah.
at the same time, we don't like him. He killed someone, and that's bad.
And really, it just wasn't enough for you to really attach to, like we said a
Mm-hmm.
couple times here. Like you just see someone who's already kind of in a situation that's not very relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have Abstergo kidnap him and, basically cover up his death, quote unquote, not real death. And even then, as they're doing the experiments with him, like you find out that his dad is in the same facility.
Mm-hmm.
There's like literally no relationship between the two of them, you
No.
know. Um, and so it's just almost every single element of the movie
Mm-hmm.
outside of those action sequences gives you really nothing to invest in.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the only real moment outside of the stunt work was at the very end when they show you the additional assassins um, that could be explored later on. Like they show you the holographic uh, memories and everything of all the other assassins that are tied to his bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
And you do see Arno Dorian from Assassin's Creed Unity. He's hanging out, and they kind of show him in that whole sequence. But other than that, I mean, I guess the biggest disappointment for me was that in the Spanish Inquisition, we're still in Europe, and it's like the Brotherhood's only 3 people.
Yeah.
I mean, I never got that aspect of some of these Assassin's Creed games, and even in the movie here, it's like I always thought the assassins would have a few more people.
Mm-hmm.
I, I just figured. Okay, I mean, you would think there'd be at least a few more of them out there, but I don't know.
No, it's a very exclusive organization. So they
Yeah.
don't have a lot of people. They don't let a lot of people in. They don't want a lot of people in. And that's where they are.
Well, either way, there's a reason why we didn't talk a moment about this during the main episode, everybody, and it's because for one, it just didn't fit within the games and discussing those. But
Mm-hmm.
for two, we just didn't want to bitch at you for a whole 90 minutes
No.
about the movie.
Yeah, no, that's too much.
So
Mm-hmm. Yep. No. And I think I'll probably get this a little wrong here, but I just remember in Desmond's last message, like this is another thing that was so well done in the series was the writing when you're with the characters you attach to. Um, Before the end of Assassin's Creed 3, he basically leaves a message for his father before they go to do the last thing in the temple, and I think you get to hear it in Black Flag. His last message he left for his dad,
yeah, yep, you do.
and
Yep.
um, his last word is something along the line of uh, when you tell my story, I think it was an Orson Welles quote that every story has a good ending depending on like where you
Where
choose
you
to end
end
the
it.
story.
Yep.
Yeah, depending where you choose to end it.
Yeah.
So he's like, when you tell my story, just tell them that I lost my way just in time to find it again and save the world, and just end it right there.
Yeah.
And we get to this movie, and we're gonna think of like cinematically Assassin's Creed. They probably should have just told the story in the trailer of a man who tried finding the apple of Eden and it looked really cool, and just stop right there, end it right there. Because we honestly didn't need the movie after that.
At this point, Joe, I don't even think we even needed the movie.
No. Just like we don't need a sequel to it. I think it's fine being done. We don't have to touch it again. Unlike Dread 2. God, do we need
Oh,
Dread 2?
God, we're gonna get our hands all over Dread 2.
That's a full episode though. We'll save that for later.
Yeah, we'll get you plenty of more Dread content later on. But either way, if you're thinking of watching the Assassin's Creed movie, this is one of those rare scenarios where I'm going to tell you you're probably better off watching something else.
Yeah, hard pass on this one. Hard pass.